fuck do you want?
Hello, and welcome back to the latest episode of What the Fuck Do You Want? And yes, 110. It's going to be a bit longer than usual. I've got a voice on with me. A voice that's been on before. An incredibly busy voice. Stormageddon, back in the studio.
Hello. Happy to be back. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you back. Well, did you get more podcasts?
No, I actually have started doing one less podcast since we last spoke. So, I'm maybe getting smarter in theory. Maybe.
It feels like the show's cursed and I've destroyed one of your podcasts. I can only apologize.
Look, I came onto your show. You showed me how brilliant you were. And I was like, I have to change everything. Everything's got to change.
Nothing over half an hour. Disgusting.
Honestly, I've told Tale many a time. We have a lot of mutual friends in different Discords who also do podcasts because that's what podcasters do. We're only friends with other podcasters, right? Because how do we promote our work otherwise? And like every time I say, oh yeah, but Punk's podcast is brilliant because it's only a fucking half hour. I don't have to go for an hour and a half and then go, I guess we're done. It's like, it's a half hour. That's it. Fuck you.
Well, that could actually work on a t-shirt. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So been keeping well since the last one?
Yeah, still working hard on stuff. You have since done an incredible and ridiculous episode of Side Quests on Legend of the River King, which was a game I'd never heard of, and now I've watched like a ton of Let's Plays on, and I will at some point play myself, but was awesome. I mean, you weren't alone. You had some help technically with that episode.
Yes.
For better or worse. Although now I'm just crafting in my head how on today's topic I can get you to say an innuendo so we can both go, yo.
Yo.
Every time. Made me lose my shit. But yeah, everything's been going well. We launched a Patreon for Fun and Games, which is my video game podcast, which has been great. We've got a bunch of people who've been contributing, and we've done a ton of like bonus content and stuff from traveling to cons and shit.
It's one of those shows. Do you upload episodes twice a week?
So because of side quests, we upload a side quest every Monday.
Yeah.
And then every other Friday is either a side quest or the main show. And so we upload twice a week. And it's 3 side quests every 2 weeks.
Because I just keep getting game names crop up on my episode list to download. It's like, oh, I love that. I love that. And also, I can't cover that now. Somebody's taking it.
Yeah, we are over 250 games covered or being covered, and it's kind of wild. I started that project 3 years ago, and it's my favorite. Like, I love all my shows I do and all my co-hosts, but there's something about side quests, and like it's great when you or I do it, but my favorite thing is when like a listener who has never podcasted before records it into their iPhone, and then I clean it up, and it sounds great, and like people love it. Like, that's my favorite thing, because giving voice to just regular ass folks playing games was the whole goal.
As much as we tell people any prick with a microphone can make a podcast, I'm living proof. Go for it. If you've got something to say, get it recorded, get it out there.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if like you just said, if this prick can do it, anyone can.
Woo. Speaking of pricks and getting their voice out, you're quite quiet on Twitter at the moment.
Yeah, I had the nerve to call out TERFs with a cartoon photo of a cat holding a knife, mind you. Not even like any real threat of violence. And poor Elon was officially offended and came for me personally and shut down my Twitter. And ever since I've continually tried to dispute it, I get an email with 3 lines that just says, your account is suspended forever. And it's like, this was totally sent by a real person and not a robot. And it's not an automated reply. And so I've been DJ_Stormageddon still exists, but is suspended. And so I've been relegated to tweeting from my podcast account, which has actually gotten the podcast more followers. So not such a bad thing. But I lost like thousands of contacts that I only spoke to through Twitter because I had the gall to call out TERFs. Meanwhile, my trans friends get shit on constantly, report it, and nothing happens. So, working as intended, right?
This censorship, I tried to get suspended. It would be good for my brand, but it just hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I mean, you throw cunts out like nobody's business, and yet, nothing.
Elon Musk is a massive cunt.
It's true. It's true. A cis cunt, because it's such a bad word.
I love this. It reminds me of when Twitch turned around and made honky.
Oh my God. Yeah. Like
the term.
Oh my God. It's like
but I always entered a room and said, hello, honkies. I said, now I'm going to have to think of something different. You cis honky.
It reminds me of the bit where like John Mulaney is like, you say the word and then you say the N word. If you can't say the other word, that's the worst word. Like, We're saying honky.
It's honky's a racial slur. And I was like, no, it's not. It's really not. There's no history attached to that word. It's a funny word and it annoys dickheads. So why would you ban a word that annoys dickheads? They're the best type.
Yeah, we want to annoy those folks.
Oh,
They can get fucked.
Well, we've been rambling for quite a bit. Shall we get to the subject at hand?
Sure, but you, of course, have to ask me the question, right? That's how this goes.
I do. For the 110th time in a row. Stormageddon.
Yes.
What the fuck do you want?
So I want to talk to you about the greatest handheld console of all time. And I've been loud about this on the internet for a while, but when I told you, you went, shit. Well, this is going to be a long one then, because you share my passion.
Oh, yeah.
I'm here to talk about the Game Boy Advance. One of the best handhelds ever made. Probably one of the best video game consoles with one of the best libraries ever. And, I had a Game Boy growing up, but it wasn't until I got the Game Boy Advance where it was like, oh, my God, this is what gaming can be on the go. Because the Game Boy was fine.
Oh, yeah.
And I loved a lot of games on there. But some of the advanced things you could do on the Advance were kind of just blew my mind as a kid. And so when I had heard other folks talk about either consoles or video games, or like you and Dave just talking about all of Yakuza, I was like, oh, well, if anything's game, I'm going to talk about this because I never shut up about how this is the best Nintendo console ever made.
So I'll have to ask, when did you first get it? Were you a day oneer?
So I was so young when it came out that I can't quite remember if I got it on release, but I definitely got it within the window of. I remember getting it, and I guess Super Mario Advanced was the first of the Advanced series to come out, which was a kind of reproduction of Mario 2 based on the Mario All-Stars Super Nintendo version. And then very early on, I also got Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, which I think came out only a couple years later.
I got it when the SP came out. That was the first game. Because I blame my need of glasses for the original Game Boy and its lack of light.
Yeah, I mean, the lack of backlight is tough, but yeah, I think I got it around release and then promptly bought every game I could get my hands on whenever I could, on any birthday or Hanukkah.
Game Boy Advance, every time you went, it was Electronics Boutique for us, was the closest one. But the game shelf seemed to change every time you walked in. There was just that many games coming out for it.
Yeah, it had a gigantic library and a gigantic launch library too. And I remember a big reason folks were poo-pooing the 3DS when it came out is because it had 10 games. But the DS and the Game Boy Advance, I think, launched with 10 or 15 games.
We'll be about that. I went with Crazy Racers.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Because I didn't like Mario Brothers 2.
Yeah, I mean, of the Mario games, it's probably the least good one, but I still like it.
Oh yeah, it has its charm, but getting a new console is no, I'm going to get something new. And Mystical Ninja in a go-kart. How could you go wrong?
I mean, I still wish that series would break bigger here. I had the Mystical Ninja game for the N64, and I just loved that game. I didn't understand it at all, but I loved it.
I was saying that was my culture shock moment with Japanese humor. Popping the card in, musical video starting. Just, what the fuck am I playing here? So, how did you first see the Game Boy Advance? It had a lot of coverage over here. I don't know if you did magazines or the like at the time.
Yeah, I was I can't remember if Game Informer was already out by then, but I know that I got EGM and Nintendo Power, of course. And yeah, I think I first saw it. I can't remember if I was aware of E3 at the time. It existed, but it wasn't as televised as it is now. Or, was, because it
was amazing. We had to wait a month or two before the magazines caught up with E3.
Yeah. But I remember seeing a magazine ad for it. I was like, oh, this is cool. I love my Game Boy. And my first question was gee, I wonder if I'll be able to play my Game Boy games on it. And when I saw that I could, I was like, this is magic. You can play right? Because back then, the consoles didn't do that. You couldn't play Nintendo games in the Super Nintendo, not in the out of the box ones. They made combo systems later. But the fact that from the get, I could play Game Boy and Game Boy Color games in the Game Boy Advance, I was like, well, this is perfect. It's literally just the
started
newest
off
thing.
with a library.
Yeah. And so that was nice.
It started off that disgusting habit too. If you ever played Game Boy games on it, I think if you press the left bumper, it would stretch.
Badly stretch the image to fit the screen.
Yeah, which I was happy with because bigger's always better.
Right, you could see what the fuck was going on. But yeah, and I think it was that early coverage that really got my attention. I mean, I was a handheld gamer my whole life. I said the G word. Terrible.
Own it.
Another slur. Yeah, right. You got to own it.
I've tried calling myself a player, but
doesn't really work.
No, people look at me going, "You're not a player."
No way. Game Boy was my favorite, like on long car rides, and like whenever I went to visit family and I didn't want to see, I would hole up in like the basement and just play my Game Boy. And so like when there was a color system that had like advanced sprite graphics, I was like, I couldn't believe it. It was like I had a handheld Super Nintendo. And like when they eventually released Super Mario World later that year, which was Mario Advance 2, like I was like, I'm playing a Super Nintendo game in my hand. Doesn't make any sense. Like,
on
how is this possible?
2 AA batteries, how does this work? Witchcraft.
Yeah, it wasn't like the fucking Game Gear, which needed like 8 batteries and died after 2 hours.
The question everybody's probably asking, which color did you go for?
So you actually held up a similar one that the listener can't see, but I had to go with the atomic purple. Like, this is a color scheme that was so popular on Nintendo stuff in the early days, and it was my favorite. The clear plastic, like you could see the insides. As a science kid also, it's like I could see the parts. And so I had that one, and then when I got the SP, I had the Nintendo themed one, which I then eventually sold, which I'm an idiot for, because now it goes for so much money.
Oh, yeah.
But I also got the red SP at launch. And what about you? Which ones did you have?
I had the Glacier one as well. I'd love the see-through plastic.
Yeah.
And I have still here the red SP and the Zelda Triforce one.
I mean, you gotta.
Yeah, it has to be done. So I was rooting around my attic for those.
Yeah, I think that they don't. Well, actually, for the Switch they still do it, but for other consoles not as much. Like the Game Boy Advanced era was when that like specialty console bullshit really started. Which
do you
like
remember
then
the tribal SP?
Yeah, with that weird tribal symbol on it. I didn't understand what that was about.
Cool tattoo that's never going to age badly.
But like then even in the SP and then the like DS and 3DS era, like there were so many custom, like it had a graphic or like a design or like a character from one of the games or whatever, and they would sell it with the game. Every Pokemon game came with a console that was literally like had a print of those Pokemon legendaries on it.
I suppose we're talking about the console itself. The SP came out later and was both lit screen and rechargeable, which was a revelation.
Yeah, recharging your own console. Because, see, back then, kids, we had to use these things called batteries. You know, most stuff these days, you just recharge it, you plug it into a wall, and you don't have to think about it. But back in my day...
I hate to think the carbon footprint of AA's I have left through my childhood. It was great because you used to fill up an old sock with the old batteries and throw them out a car window when you went past. That was how you disposed of them.
Right. They didn't have this specialty, like, safe disposal of batteries like we do now.
No.
You just throw them out a window or off a highway.
Hit a
see
cyclist.
What they crack. Yeah, exactly.
So, yes, these little 32-bit machines, which were supposed to be as powerful as the PlayStation, but were technically just handheld Super Nintendos. What was the game that made you realize, ooh, this is actually quite a powerful little machine?
So there are two, but the first one I have to talk about is one that I never shut up about online because it's the reason I love this franchise. But Metroid Fusion is not only one of the best games on the console, but like really put everything the console could do into overdrive. Because I will say this till I'm blue in the face. Metroid Fusion is a survival horror game. If you play that game, especially as a kid, like I don't care what you say, I fight a giant creature with a monitor for a face and a face that's melting called Nightmare. That shit is scary. The first time you encounter the SAX and it shows like Samus with those hollow eyes, it's like...
The music and everything to accompany it. It's just...
Yeah. Well, also some of the most powerful speakers back then that didn't really actually muddy the music that much. But Metroid Fusion, I think, was the total package that really showed me that this console could do, I feel like, even more than the Super Nintendo could do at the time.
Yeah.
Metroid Fusion not only does it control well and look gorgeous and like have incredible artwork and incredible music and sound effects, but like even... when I replayed it recently on Nintendo Switch Online, because of course I did, even though I own it, I played it there also. It's just incredible what they were able to pack into that game. Like, it's a 5-hour Metroid game, which is pretty standard, but like the bosses, the graphics, the different areas, the different biomes that look completely different. Like, the VFX of like the pixelization of the molecules as you would absorb them and stuff. Like it was all just so really cool. And I just couldn't believe this was in a handheld because I'd just not seen anything like that.
Yeah, well, we step up previously from the Game Boy Color to this. It was a massive jump for the time.
Yeah. And like I still to this day believe that the pixel art of the Game Boy Advance generation is some of the best pixel art in existence, and definitely for sure inspired games like The Messenger and Shovel Knight and the like, you know. And
Yeah.
I think all have aged much better. Like you look at some of the old polygonal games, and I love Mario 64 as much as the next person, but like if you don't know what you're playing, that game does not look great. It looks like a bunch of blocks.
No, you do try to introduce younger members of the family to it, and it does not end well.
But like I feel like all of the games, like I think about Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, which was the first like real proper Mario RPG we got since Legend of the Seven Stars.
Yeah.
And don't even get me started on the remake they just announced. I like lost
I've already
my
got it pre-ordered.
I just lost my goddamn mind. Like I never in a million years thought I'd get that.
When the trailer started, I thought it was getting added to Nintendo Switch Online.
Same.
Bang.
Yeah.
Remake. Lovely. Well done,
Yeah.
Nintendo. Have a biscuit.
Yeah. But like Mario and Luigi, like the expressiveness of the sprites, the characters, the dialogue, all of it was just like
Was a charmer.
Yeah, it just felt like something I had never seen before. And I think the Game Boy Advance really allowed Nintendo to like play with the form in a way that they couldn't. They probably wanted to on the Game Boy, and they like teased at with some games, but couldn't quite get there because of how limited the system was.
So when we're finishing off the Game Boy Advance, we've talked about the original model, we've talked about the SP. Did you ever play with the micro?
I did. I have my hands are too big.
I ran into that problem
A good
too.
problem to have, I said. Like I try, a friend had it and I tried. Also the screen's too small, and as I'm approaching 40, looking at something that tiny, it's like it's funny. Like you mentioned the size, like I hadn't had a Game Boy Advance SP for a while. Like I traded it in like an idiot and got rid of my library.
Yeah.
And then when like stuff was getting harder to find and I really wanted to play some older SP games, or advanced games, but I didn't want to play them on the PC because it was just so blown out. I was like, all right, I'll try and get an SP. And my co-host on Funny Games, Jeff, was able to find me one and get it for me. And when he dropped it off, I remember holding it in my hand and going, this thing's fucking tiny. It wasn't this small. But I guess I got a lot bigger. And so it just feels so much smaller now to me in my giant hands. But like at the time I was like, this thing is great. It's the perfect size. I was like, no, I was the perfect size for it at the time.
Yes, I had to go back. There is a website in the UK, Retro6, and I have bought a refurbished, rechargeable original model with backlight and clicky buttons. This does feel like an ad sponsor bit, but it's fucking fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, the modding scene is something that's really, I think the Game Boy Advance really benefited from, because a lot of like early modding scenes, especially during the pandemic, like a lot of it blew up with like modding the old Game Boy and the Game Boy Advance and to give them stuff like backlights and things that Nintendo
would take for granted now.
Yeah, and like Nintendo probably would have had if they could afford it, but like it's every cost that they could cut. And even the backlight in the SP it's fine, but it's not great. Like
Yeah, because there's two models. Was there 001 and 2?
Yeah.
The 2's backlit, 1's frontlit.
Yeah. And so like the front, I think the original is frontlit, and so you can see it better than a Game Boy Advance, but it's not as good as the backlight, which they would use in almost everything else after.
Yes, somebody went down an eBay rabbit hole once upon a time.
Trying to buy these games now, like I'm really grateful a friend of mine, Scott White, who's the host of RPG University, which is a great RPG podcast if you're looking for one. We were talking, we were hanging out at a convention not that long ago, and I was like, yeah, I really, like I started collecting all of the Metroid amiibo because there aren't that many, so I feel like I can get a complete set and call it instead of getting everything. And I was like, there aren't that many Metroid games. I wish I could get my hands on them, and I really miss Metroid Fusion, which was my favorite game. And he's like, oh, I might have an extra one at home. I was like, really? He's like, yeah. And so it turns out he had an extra copy of Metroid Prime and Metroid Fusion, and so he sent them to me for the price of shipping, pretty much. Like maybe charged me a little bit for each. Right, because like Fusion alone in mediocre quality is anywhere between $75 to $100 on the low end. And like that's happened to a lot of Game Boy Advance games, unfortunately, is because there aren't really, like, besides like fan refurbs and fan modded ones.
I noticed it, especially the Analog Pocket after it was released. Prices just kept climbing.
Well, because now everyone wants these games because they can actually plug them into a console, and like the price just goes up.
So we've covered the console, but a console only gets you so far. Let's talk some fucking games.
I mentioned Fusion, which is still to this day, one of the best Metroid games. Although Dread gives it a run for its money. I really did enjoy Dread. I liked what they did with the series for that, and it also really culminates the Fusion story very well. But the thing that the Game Boy Advance has that most people don't know is it has the best Zelda game that no one's ever played, and that's The Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap. And I know plenty of folks have played it, but whenever there are conversations about the best Zelda game, it's Tears of the Kingdom or Breath of the Wild or Link to the Past.
They're all wrong. It's Link's Awakening.
But for me, it'll always be The Legend of the Zelda Minish Cap, which is actually made by Capcom, which is easy to forget. And like they just did a run of bangers because they also did the 2 Oracle games right before that on the Game Boy Color. And Minish,
and if you didn't see the logo at the start of the game, you wouldn't be able to set them apart from the other Zeldas.
No, they feel just like the other Zeldas. Like they must have had a roadmap or like a basic guideline because it doesn't feel like it's like a different version. It just feels like another Zelda game. And I love the top-down Zelda games. They'll always be my preference. But the thing about the Minish Cap that I really love is there's no Ganon. It's a totally different story. Like it's still Zelda, it's still Link, but there's no Ganon except for like the weird Shadow Ganon you fight near the end. Spoilers, I guess, for a very old game. But like
fuck you. Deal with it.
But like it's just such a cool and interesting story. The mechanic in this one, the gimmick, if you will, is that you find this talking hat, which is a wizard that got cursed, and he can shrink you down to talk to the Minish people who like live in the cracks and crevices of Hyrule. And it's just such cool like perspective stuff and like the parallaxing where like you shrink down. It's a brilliant game, and like I'm so glad it came to the Nintendo Switch Online a few months ago because now a ton of folks who never had access to it can play this game for the first time.
It is something special and a hard one to complete if you get into the medallion.
Oh my god!
Yeah.
Oh, fuck those medallions.
A lot of hours poured into that. One jumps out to me, and it forever was an example of the graphics of the console, was the Battle Network series.
Hell yeah. Sure.
Just seeing those screenshots, and to my mind, I can see the limitations now, but it just looked like a PlayStation game.
Yeah, absolutely.
On handheld.
And like that, it also was one of the more successful Mega Man spin-off series that debuted on handheld, too.
Well, on the Game Boy Advance, you had the Zero series as well as Battle Network. Like, the 2 series were on fire. Capcom did a lot of good work on this console.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think, like, talking about graphics, like, and also remakes, like this console kind of started the remake revolution a little bit, for better or worse. We got remakes and re-releases of a ton of Final Fantasy games that never made it to the States. 1 and 2, Dawn of Dreams, and then 6 also got like an update on it. And then like one of the most definitive ways to play my favorite Kirby game, Kirby's Adventure, was released as Kirby Nightmare in Dreamland, and like had this like Super Nintendo makeover. And it's the best way to play that game. Or think about Metroid Zero Mission. Metroid 1, I love Metroid. Love that series. Metroid 1 and 2 can go fuck themselves. They are so goddamn hard. And like what I love about Zero Mission is it's still a challenging game, but it retakes that story, contextualizes it, adds some extra stuff. But it still feels like the first Metroid game. And it's really neat.
And I do love that they don't replace the original. It's as well as.
Yeah.
You can still go and play the original, but if you want some quality of life, we've something else for you too.
Yeah, totally.
Looks gorgeous too.
Oh my god, looks gorgeous. The music, I mean, also probably one of my favorite Game Boy Advance soundtracks is for Wario Land 4, which was one of the most bizarre and awesome games on that console.
Poor Wario deserves another platformer.
Oh, man, I will complain. Like, he's getting a new WarioWare. Great. I like WarioWare. I think it's a fun game. I love the gimmick. But he had some of the best platformers. Wario World, justice for Wario World on the GameCube. One of the best 3D platformers that nobody talks about. And like Wario Land 4 is one of the weirdest and coolest 2D platformers. And it's just locked onto this console. Like there's been no re-releases, no access to it. It's not on Nintendo Switch Online yet. Like, but like they had these weird graphics. They had sound test mode where you could listen to these sound effects and weird songs that weren't even in the game. It was wild shit.
Yeah, Wario definitely did things his own way. It was invincible too, technically. You couldn't die as him.
Yeah, it was about puzzle solving more than like actual lives and dying, which was was unheard of back then. Like you had to have lives, but this was very, very differently delivered.
What was his last one? Shake It?
Yes, on the Wii. Yeah. They haven't done a side-scrolling one since. Bummer. And Shake It actually was pretty good, too. It had this, like, anime aesthetic.
Yeah, it's just going back to waggle controls, just always leave a sour. When you're playing something and think to yourself, this would be better with a classic control scheme.
Yeah, that was most of the Wii's life, unfortunately.
Sadly. Some gold in there, but you had to shovel a lot of shit to find it. One I wanted to mention, I don't know if you've played it on the Game Boy Advance, River City Ransom EX.
Yeah, sure.
How many hours I sank into that. It's, again, another port, but they brought so much forward. It's like a side-scrolling beat-em-up, but with RPG elements, and if you beat up somebody well enough, you could steal their move and add it to your card. This game, if you could only have one Game Boy Advance game, I think this could last you a couple of years just for content alone.
For sure. And like if you like the River City Girls games, which are excellent, like they're all inspired by the lore that this game and its predecessors had. And so like if you enjoy those and haven't played this, you have to go back. I mean, it's funny, I think franchises had some of their most definitive games on this console too. Think about Castlevania. And I love Symphony of the Night, which is probably still my favorite Castlevania game. But the Game Boy Advance games, especially Circle of the Moon, kind of recontextualized how the Castlevania games were made and kind of led to the Metroidvania revolution that we had in the coming years. Tons of really great Castlevania games back when, Konami did more than pachinko machines.
Oh, a golden age that it was.
When they made video games.
I think too, a lot of people were playing around. 3D was relatively new in this day and age, so it was nice to have developers go back to 2D, kind of go back to the drawing board for a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Mario vs. Donkey Kong was huge, and like that was the first time they'd been in a game together since the classic game, and it was a puzzle game, which was like one of those things.
I've got it right here. Whoop. I really shouldn't have things to play with while I'm recording. It makes for bad audio. That's
true. I mean, but we get to enjoy it, so I guess fuck the listener.
Yeah. I don't have a Patreon. I'm not impressing anybody.
This is free content. They got to take what they can get.
Yes, Super Mario Advance 4, Super Mario Bros. 3, and Mario vs. Donkey Kong.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, I mean, F-Zero was on here, and F-Zero GP Legend was actually a really fun F-Zero game.
Is that the one that was based in the show?
Yeah, and then there was Maximum Velocity, which was like it was a spin-off or something. Man, I can't believe Mario Kart Super Circuit was the first like handheld Mario Kart that actually like really felt like a Mario Kart. I think it was the first handheld Mario Kart at all. There wasn't one on the Game Boy.
It's when you unlocked the tracks from the Super Nintendo version. It's just really brought it all together. So this shouldn't work in your hand.
Yeah, it was also the earliest time here in the GameCube where Sonic appeared on a Nintendo system.
Of course, yeah.
Sonic Advance, which was like is one of the best 2D Sonic games. Also, I feel like not a ton of folks played, but like I love the Advance series. I think all three of those games are really great.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Sonic Battle, it was Game Boy Advance as well.
That was Game Boy Advance as well.
Another one you could pour hours into, but the 3D battle landscape was not easy to navigate.
No, not at all.
And you could link it up with the GameCube with Phantasy Star Online. Get the Chow Garden.
Yeah, Chow Garden. Where's my Chow Garden game? Come on, Nintendo, you're slacking.
You think you just get it on mobile?
Right. Well, Sega would be printing money. It's the same thing with like I've talked about this with everybody. That the Cabaret game in Yakuza, if there was a mobile game version of it, it would ruin all of us. We'd stop making content because we'd be playing that all the time.
You've run out of Yakuza dollars. Just top up and get it. Yep. Okay. Yeah.
All right. Sure. All right. You got my money. Fine.
I'm going to make it fucking rain.
You mentioned the Zero series earlier. I'd only played the first one on Game Boy, and I was bad at it. Those games were really hard.
They are very hard.
But I recently bought the collection of that and ZX on the Switch, and I played through the first two games, and they were incredible. Like, incredibly cinematic also for, like, Mega Man games, right?
The opening of 2 in the desert is up there. It is superb.
We also got a ton of great pinball games on this console. Mario Land pinball. What was it? Pokemon's, I think, Sapphire and Ruby pinball was also this. I never really associated Nintendo with pinball games, but like you look at the legacy, like actually there were a lot of pinball games based on other franchises that were pretty good.
I did like the one, I'm sure the advanced ones had them too, but I didn't have them physically. The Game Boy Color one rumbled. It had a little rumble pack with it.
Yeah, totally.
So
well, also Kirby Tilt and Tumble on the Game Boy Advance, where they had those weird rumble packs or like the motion sensor things in the cartridge.
We're getting to this point of the show now where I think we're just going to have to start firing names of games that we like at each other, because we're not going to get through them all.
No, impossible to really tackle them all.
So we shall take turns and then see if we have anything to say about them and then move on.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
I've got Harvest Moon, Friends of Mineral Town.
Of course, you know, one of the premier life sim games that I think I think this game is responsible for getting a lot of folks, especially of our generation, into those kinds of games because it was just so readily available.
I'd say this one's the most similar to Stardew Valley for people that have never played it.
Yeah,
because it's a weird one. It's a port of the PlayStation game, but it's remade to look like one of the Super Nintendo games.
Yeah, which is a thing they did back then.
Of course.
I hinted at remakes before, but Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green were like
my favorite Pokemon games.
Just like, I love the original Pokemon, but the quality of life upgrades in those games and getting to get Pokemon Green, because like I've told this story in other places. I loved Bulbasaur so much that I played the first Pokemon game on 3.5 floppy disk on emulator because it's the only way I could play Pocket Monsters Green in the States. Yeah. And so when they released Leaf Green instead of a blue version for the remake, I was like, oh, holy shit. All right, I got to go buy that day one.
Yes, I was a Fire Red person myself.
Fair enough.
Fire's better. It burns grass. After that, I've got Summon Night Swordcraft Story.
Oh, I'm not familiar with that one. What was that?
I picked this one up. It is an RPG where you craft your own weapons. You grow up in a town. You're a knight, but you have to delve into the underground, get resources, bring them back up, make weapons. But for anybody that's going to play it for the first time, you can unlock drill weapons.
Amazing.
And it's one of those things, if you equip a drill weapon, corner your opponent because you fight monsters below, but when you come back up, you fight other knights. But if you use the drill and hold down and attack, you do this constant, it's like Blanca from Street Fighter, this constant attack. Keep using that until your opponent's weapon breaks. Not only do you win the fight right away, you get the schematics for their weapon.
Oh, that's brilliant.
It's one of those games. It got a sequel as well that I didn't gel as well with, but yeah, nice series.
I mean, talking about RPGs that were born of this console, Golden Sun and Golden Sun The Lost Age are two of the best RPGs I've ever played that literally you can't play anywhere else, and it bugs the hell out of me. And we were supposed to get like a remake or a sequel at some point. I think there was a console third game on one or something.
There was a DS game?
Maybe it was a DS game. And like, this franchise needs to come back because I still think the first Golden Sun is like one of the coolest RPGs.
Why are Camelot making sports games? What the fuck are they doing?
I know. And the funniest thing is that their sports games are also RPGs half the time too, which is amazing.
Well, Mario Golf for the Game Boy Color, it's up there with one of the best RPGs ever.
But yeah, I mean, Camelot, stop making shitty versions of Mario Party and come back and make fucking Golden Sun.
Golden Sun was one of those games too. Whenever you seen screenshots of it in magazines, it just, how is this in handheld?
Right, yeah, it looked like claymation almost. It was like, how is this real?
Well, if we're talking top class RPGs, Final Fantasy Tactics.
Hell yeah. Tactics Advance is, I think, a way a lot of my friends played it because they didn't have PlayStations. We were Nintendo kids, so we had the Game Boy. Just
looking at this list of games, I hate to think of the collective hours poured into them all. These are all meaty RPGs.
It reminds me that I had so much more time as a kid. Like, I wouldn't get to play half these games now as an adult. Like, who's got time for it? I just picked up Final Fantasy 16 the day of when we're recording, and it's going to take me at least 6 months to get through it because it's probably like 100 hours long. I don't even know.
A peek behind the curtain, I finished Zelda about an hour ago, and that was 100 hours.
Yeah.
Or more, according to the Switch. It's very accurate.
It's so accurate.
Again, when we were talking about Capcom as well, Breath of Fire 1 and 2, games that I had seen advertised for the Super Nintendo, never got to play. 2 excellent ports that came the year after each other.
Yeah, and like, I had played 3 first, which is one of my favorite RPGs of all time. And like, after then playing those and seeing that these games came out on the Game Boy Advance, I was like, oh, I have to go back and play those, and love them. I love the Breath of Fire series. That's another one that needs to come back. They kind of killed themselves.
We've already done an episode. Fuck off.
I know. Well, that's still what the fuck I want. So I'm just saying, it's got to come back. Where the hell is it?
Yeah, we mentioned the mobile port. That's just,
Oh no.
that was a
So
spit in
bad.
the face. Capcom.
Yeah.
You've been on fire lately.
Bring it back. Do it.
You got another one for us?
This game holds a special place in my heart. It's the worst version of this game, but Mega Man and Bass
Oh, yeah.
on Game Boy Advance. Like, I love this game. It was, for those who don't know, Mega Man Bass was like the 10th Mega Man game, or no, the 8th Mega Man game.
Mm-hmm.
But like, then it never got released in the States. And then way after we got the actual Mega Man 8 on PlayStation, they also released this port of, I think it was a Famicom game. I can't even remember. And like, it's bad. The screen crunch, Bass is not really a lot of fun to play as, but like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I have a soft spot for it because I love classic Mega Man.
It is this one and Mega Man 7 or 2. I just adore the visual style of, but they are
Yeah.
fucking horrible to play.
Oh my God. I love Mega Man 7 on Super Nintendo so much, and someone recently played it and they're like, this was garbage. I was like, you're not wrong, but I still love it.
It's like a child. You have to love it.
Yeah, pretty much. I loved the Donkey Kong Country releases on Game Boy Advance. They weren't as good as the Super Nintendo versions, but they were still pretty solid. And like, for a travel version of those incredible games, you could do worse.
Definitely. Another Super Nintendo release. We never got Tales of Fantasia.
Yeah.
Loved it, although when I originally played it, I think I've discussed this on Discords before. The English fan translation and the team that did it just went haywire. It's the line, I bet Rhea fucks like a tiger.
What?
Playing this on an emulator, and I was like, did I read that right? Oh.
Is someone punking me?
This is a bit risque for a Super Nintendo game. So yeah, apparently the localization team did take a few liberties.
Even though I hadn't played them back then, but I'm on a mission to play them now. The Fire Emblem, and then Fire Emblem, I think Path of Radiance was also Game Boy Advance. Was that them? No, the Sacred
Radiance
Stones.
was
It
GameCube.
Fire Emblem and Fire Emblem the Sacred Stones. And I've now, since having played Three Houses and dabbling in some of the older games, like, these games are so impressive on the Game Boy Advance. Like, even not playing through all of them, like, just the tactics and the setup and how detailed it is, it's brilliant.
Well, it was around this time too. You had Smash Brothers Melee, and people were trying to work out who the Hoors with swords were.
Yeah.
So it was good. Fire Emblem came out. I did notice the first ones got added to Nintendo Switch Online.
They did, yeah.
Yeah, I love dating my show.
Yeah, then now people know exactly when it came out. I also really liked the movie tie-in games. They were never very good, but like, it was just fun to have
was a novelty.
Spider-Man. Yeah, it was a novelty. And so like the Spider-Man games and some of the other stuff. I mean, also
Well, my brother had Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. I think that was one of his first ones, and it was quite a solid game.
Yeah. And then like you could play Doom 1 and 2 on the Game Boy, and like a lot of screen crunch, but still really fun to play on the Game Boy.
Shining Soul 1 and 2, if you've ever had the pleasure.
I've not actually, but they're RPGs, right?
They are Sega ones. The charm was you could link them up. They were action RPGs. You could have 4 players.
Oh, cool.
I think it was one of those ones where you could play if one person had one cart and you could link the rest up. But I think we tried that once and the loading time was abysmal.
I'm sure. I mean, most games ran really well on this console, but not all of them did.
There was a feature, and it seemed like a good idea if one of you owns a game. I think Mario Kart allowed you to do this as well. You could link up other consoles and they could play it from your copy. Saved everybody having to buy the same game. They were £35 over in the UK, which quite expensive, especially then.
Way more expensive now, though.
Yeah, should have held on to them. But yeah, if everybody linked up to the game, they could play along for free, but the loading times were fucking disgusting.
Mario Tennis Power Tour. I mean, we were talking about Camelot earlier, like, just such a fun tennis game on Game Boy Advance. Like, I never thought that I'd love the Mario sports games. Between Mario Golf on Game Boy Color and then this one, it was like, what are they doing? How did they make this happen? What magic is this?
But golf is boring. Tennis is boring. Hold on, sunshine. Have I got a game for you? Another one I think I picked up early, and it was one I picked up for cheap. Bomberman Tournament.
Sure, yeah.
Bomberman tried to jump on the Pokemon trend.
Yeah, it was fine.
It was fine. It was the rock, paper, scissors battles. That was down to pure luck. Who the fuck thought that was a good idea?
Yeah, I mean, and also probably will alienate an entire franchise if we don't mention this game, because it was kind of the first time like that a Square Enix series did a spin-off, but Chain of Memories, Kingdom Hearts, which was a card battle game. Man, I remember buying that game on day one, like, I'm so excited, a portable Kingdom Hearts, I can't wait. And then they introduced the card battle system. I'm like, what is this shit? What the hell are we doing? And I was so bad at it. They've since released like a PS4 collection where there's like a version of it where you can actually kind of skip the battles and just see the cutscenes. And so I've seen a lot of the story.
Which says a lot about your game if you need that as an option.
So like I remember I just couldn't beat Hades. Like he would just whoop my ass. And I was like, how do I play this game? I'm sure now, having played a lot more card battlers, I could go back. But back then
Yes, and destroy everyone.
But back then I just didn't understand. I was like, why can't I swing my Keyblade? I don't have any more Keyblade cards. What does that mean?
How does that work? So yeah, I think with that stage, I'm just going to dump games because we're going to get messages for not mentioning this or that.
Yeah, of course.
My notable games: Riviera, The Promised Land was a weird RPG visual book one. Don't know why I liked it, but I did. Mario Kart, we've talked about the Mario Advances. Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo Revival.
Yeah.
Oh, and handheld, lovely. The NES classics. Did you play any of them?
Yeah, I mean that was the first copy of Metroid I ever owned because I didn't own the NES version, so I had the classics version. It was a blast.
We had Zelda: Link to the Past. We had Advance Wars, Golden Sun. We've mentioned Tactics Ogre.
Yeah.
Sonic Advance. The Namco Pac-Man Museum. I really had to put that in there. And Metal Slug Advance.
Metal Slug Advance was great. Also, Boktai was really cool. I remember not understanding, but the fact that you had a game where like it revolved. First of all, this is a Kojima joint, which is bizarre, and it's like it had this mechanic for those who don't know. So Boktai, The Sun Is in Your Hand, was a cartridge with a clear like this weird like solar panel thing on the top of it, and when you played it in daylight, it affected the game because you were fighting against vampires. It was the most ridiculous thing, but sounds very Kojima when you say it out loud, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I was never any good at it, but like I have friends who love this game.
I don't know if it never released over here, but I definitely know playing a game that requires sunlight in fucking Ireland would not ever finish.
No, that's true, because I mean, you don't even know what the sun looks like anymore.
No, I mean, we're not even considered Caucasian. We're more greyish blue. Not even a honky. So have you any honorable mentions before we...
I mean, I think that's it. We covered a lot of the series and stuff that I loved. I mean, I think the cool thing about this console, as I've said before, is it gave us access to a lot of older games that we might not have played before too, both in collections and like re-releases and remakes. Also, like, brought things I loved from other places to the mainstream in a way that I'd never seen before. There were a bunch of Goku games on the Game Boy Advance, and
there was the fighting games as well for Dragon Ball Z.
Yep, there were like
Zed.
There were 3 story-based games, 2 or 3, and then like 2. It was Legacy of Goku 1 and 2, and then the third one was just called Boo's Fury. And then they had a couple of fighting games. They were all really fun to play and kind of impressive. And we got a Jet Grind radio, which was, not as impressive as Jet Set, but still pretty cool to play on the Game Boy. I think that's it. I think we've covered just about everything. I'm sure some prick in the comments is going to be like, hey, you didn't talk about this one. Well, sorry.
Nobody'd be that fucking brave. I have so much free time and a little notebook full of insults that haven't been used yet. But yeah, I mean, these games lived on when the Wii U was out, the whole virtual console. Like, I stocked up on so many of them. It's quite sad that we can't do it on the Switch, because that would be the perfect home for a lot of these.
Yeah, I like that it's free if you pay for the online, which we all pay for anyway.
It's the subscription model.
Yeah, it's just I want these games. I mean, the Game Boy Advance has led me down.
You tell them what the fuck you want, Nintendo. Listen up, Doug.
It's one of those things where game preservation, you can't talk about Game Boy Advance without talking about game preservation, because it's one of those consoles that's really screwed over by lack of game preservation, because there's so many games on this console that have not just been re-released anywhere. You just can't play them. And it gets worse as we go down the Nintendo rabbit hole.
Oh, yeah.
There are tons of stuff. And the PS3, tons of PS3 games that just don't exist anymore.
It's lost to the ether.
Yeah.
So I would like to see them make an effort, bring back the virtual console. I'm guessing, as it was used to hack the last generation of consoles, they probably want to stay away from it.
Yeah, but it'd be nice to have it back. I mean, that was the way I played Super Mario RPG all the time after I got rid of my Super Nintendo, was on the Wii. I just would play it over and over again.
It was the first time we were able to get it over in Europe.
Oh, nice.
For a lot of stuff, we had to wait for a PlayStation port of Final Fantasy VI, and even then the loading times kind of killed any urge to play it. Will we get to closing thoughts? Do you want to wax lyrical about the Game Boy Advance, the beautiful little console that it is?
Yeah. I mean, I think I've said a lot already about how I feel about it, but I think what it comes down to...
But was it enough?
I mean, it's never enough. We're podcasters. We could talk for another hour at least, but we won't torture your poor listeners with that. Although they're probably used to it by now at this point.
More than likely, yeah.
I mean, I think what's really funny to me about the Game Boy Advance now is like a lot of younger folks in the games industry like just don't seem to have that fondness for it. Because I think you had to have it at the time. Because also a lot of these games have been like the remakes and re-releases have been released in other places, like the old Mario games and stuff.
Yeah.
But some of the RPGs here, and like since we've gotten like a remake of Superstar Saga, though it's not as good as the original, like they changed some things. And so it's, I think as we get more re-releases, I'm grateful to see these games in other places. And now that at least we have Game Boy Advance on the Nintendo Switch Online, like there is a chance that because this library is so good, that all of the games they announce are bangers and not just weird, obscure games that were never released in the States that the Nintendo and Super Nintendo are digging into now at this point. I'm still mad we didn't get Mario RPG on the Nintendo Switch Online, but I understand now. I'm mad about it still, but I get it.
Why won't we give you it for free when we can, what is it, $60 for you guys?
Yeah.
Bastards.
But it truly, I think, still to this day is one of the best pixel art centered consoles and has one of the best libraries. I think that the Switch is getting close because of the access to indie games that are really great and some other third-party stuff. But like, there was a lot of cool third-party stuff on this console, and the first-party stuff is some of the best in their franchises. I mean, again, Zelda, Mario, the myriad of Mario stuff, Mario Kart, Mario RPG, mainline Mario games, all really great on this console. Although it occurs to me, there was no original Mario, like 2D platformer on this console. We didn't get that till New Super Mario Brothers on the DS. And so like they just re-released games, which is a little sad that we didn't get like a core Mario game on the console, because I'm sure it would be really great.
We got pinball. What more do you want?
Exactly. But I think it has still to this day one of the best libraries, and the thing that I think holds it above a lot of other older consoles is going back and playing these games aren't a chore. They're still fun. Every time I play Metroid Fusion, it still feels good. It's one of the best controlling Metroid games ever made. And so like I love that about this console too, is that they were made so well that the controls literally don't need any changing or updating. I mean, I think about the Zero re-releases, and like from what I can tell, it's 1-to-1 and it feels great.
And these are being added to the Switch, as we mentioned, without any tweaks, so structurally they still stand up very well.
Agreed.
But I can see your meaning, yeah, if anybody came in new to this, younger players, handheld gaming isn't the novelty it used to be.
No, for sure not. I mean, people enjoy it because of the Switch, but I know so many folks younger than me are like, why do you carry it around? Just plug it into your TV. It's better that way. I'm like, disagree. Especially with the OLED screen.
Have you ever docked a Game Boy Advance? It looks awful.
Well, let's not get into a conversation about docking on your podcast. I feel like we'll lose some listeners.
Oh, well, thin the herd. If they weren't able to handle that sort of conversation, they came to the wrong fucking show.
It's true.
Speaking of the wrong fucking show, do you want to promote yours?
I would love to. Thank you again for having me. I love waxing eloquent about...
Thank you for coming back.
I will come back anytime. I adore the show, and I am an active listener of it, and so it's always great to come back. If folks want to find me, I guess they can't fucking find me on Twitter. But you can follow Fun and Games Pod on Twitter. That is my video game podcast, and where I'm putting my personal tweets for now, because I am not starting from scratch again. Fuck that noise. But if you want to check out all the things I do, you can go to djstormageddon.com. You can follow, if you're on Blue Sky, you can follow me at DJ Stormageddon there, because they don't like underscores, so it's just DJ Stormageddon.
Oh, did you get an invite?
I did. I'm one of those special ones.
Bastard.
I mean, I get invites every 2 weeks, so maybe if you're nice to me, I'll send you one.
Yes, I would go down a treat over there.
Yeah, djstormageddon.com, and then all of my podcasts are on every podcast platform that imaginable. Wherever you're listening to this fucking show, you can listen to my fucking shows. It's Fun and Games with Matt and Jeff, Screen Snark, and Reignite, which is my BioWare podcast. We've moved on to the Dragon Age franchise, which, let me tell you, as much as I love Dragon Age Origins, it is shit on PC and crashes all the fucking time. It's just awful. Any support that you can throw our way, we greatly appreciate. Rate us, review us, do that for this fucking podcast, because it helps us all. It's the same bullshit. It's the same shtick. And if you somehow are listening to the show and are already a fan of Fun and Games but aren't aware of our Patreon somehow, because we never shut up about it, we have a Patreon. A couple bucks go a long way. Jeff and I have been doing this for a long time, and we've been able to grow and improve the show in a lot of great ways, thanks to the support of the listeners ever since we've launched the Patreon. We're going to more conventions, having extra scratch to buy better recording equipment, buy plane tickets, buy stuff for the convention. All of that stuff is greatly appreciated. That said, just listening, I greatly appreciate too. So thank you for having me again, and if anyone checks out that stuff, I would greatly appreciate it.
Perfect. And yes, I'll have all links in show notes if you're too lazy to Google, you pricks. So it is the end of the episode, and it is actually time for my summer holidays. I'm not going to be back until September, so fuck all of you. Your Mondays are now pointless. So I should thank you, Stormageddon, for coming back again. I just wanted to get that out of the way first. I'm quite bitter about it.
I appreciate you having me. It's a lot of pressure to be the last guest before you end the show forever. I mean, until September. So, but I'll carry that weight.
He's not coming back.
That's it. What you don't know is that Punk's going to murder me after this. It's all over after this.
It's a possibility for every guest. It's like Russian roulette.
Right, exactly.
But Irish.
Which makes it worse.
But it is that time of the show. Stormageddon!
Yes.
Until next time, get fucked.